The training grounds of Orbital Station Nexus 7 stretched beneath the cold glow of artificial suns. Rows of young Velothi cubs stood in formation, their silver-furred bodies trembling despite the regulated temperature. Their large amber eyes darted between each other, communicating in silent terror. Vash, the eldest among them at barely 12 cycles, positioned himself at the front. His ears lay flat against his skull, a sign of submission among his kind, though inside, his heart burned with something far more dangerous: defiance. Senior Instructor Drawl circled the formation like a predator savoring wounded prey. His scales gleamed obsidian under the lights, and in his clawed hand, he gripped a neural whip, a weapon designed not to mark flesh, but to ignite every pain receptor in the victim's nervous system simultaneously. 47 seconds, Drawl hissed, his forked tongue tasting the fear in the air. The obstacle course requires completion in 40 seconds. You have failed. All of you. Another instructor, Morvax, stepped forward with his own whip crackling with blue energy. The Galactic Military Academy does not tolerate failure. You will learn, cubs. Pain is the greatest teacher. Vash's claws dug into his palms. He remembered his mother's words before she sent him here. Survive. Whatever it takes, survive. But watching the instructors raise their whips toward the smallest cubs, little Tila, who was only 8 cycles and still cried for her mother at night. Something inside Vash cracked. Wait, he stepped forward, his voice breaking. Punish me. I am the leader. The failure is mine. Drawl's lips curled into something approximating a smile. Noble. Foolish, but noble. He gestured to Morvax. Very well. Double punishment for the cub leader. The rest will watch and learn. The whips rose. Vash closed his eyes. Stop. The word was not loud. It was not shouted or screamed. It was spoken with the calm certainty of a star going supernova, quiet at the core, devastating at the edges. Every being on the training ground froze. Kalen stepped out from the observation deck shadow, his boots echoing against the metal floor with measured precision. He was not particularly tall by human standards, nor especially muscular. His dark hair was streaked with gray at the temples, and his face carried the weathered lines of someone who had seen too many battles and buried too many friends. But his eyes, those pale gray eyes, held something that made even Drawl's scales ripple with instinctive unease. Human, Morvax spat the word like a curse. This is not your concern. Return to your quarters. Kalen continued walking until he stood between the instructors and the cubs. He didn't look at the whips. He looked directly into Drawl's serpentine eyes. I said stop. You have no authority here, Drawl growled, though his whip arm had not moved since Kalen spoke. These are Velothi cubs under draconian instruction protocols. Your species has no jurisdiction. I have jurisdiction over cruelty. Kalen interrupted, his voice still terrifyingly calm. I have jurisdiction over cowardice. And I have jurisdiction over any being who believes that breaking children makes soldiers. Behind him, Vash watched with wide eyes. He had heard stories of humans, whispered tales in the dormitories late at night. They said humans were soft, weak, lacking claws or scales or venom. They said humans died easily, but they also said other things. They said humans had conquered their own world through sheer, stubborn refusal to die. They said humans formed bonds so strong they would walk into certain death for creatures not even of their own species. They said humans had something the galaxy had no word for, something that made predators hesitate and empires reconsider. Drawl's whip crackled. You would challenge both of us? For these worthless cubs? Kalen smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. I ended the siege of Vorkith with 17 soldiers against 3,000. I walked into the hive caves of Nexus Prime alone and walked out carrying the ambassador's daughter on my back. I have been shot, stabbed, burned, poisoned, and left for dead on 6 different worlds. He took one step closer to Drawl, and somehow, impossibly, the massive draconian instructor took one step back. I have never lost a fight I chose to fight, and I am choosing this one. Silence. Then Morvax lowered his whip. This will be reported, he managed. Reported. Kalen turned his back on both instructors, a gesture of absolute contempt, and knelt before Vash. His voice, when he spoke now, was impossibly gentle. What's your name, son? Vash, sir. Vash. Kalen nodded slowly. You stepped forward to take punishment for the others. That wasn't foolish. That was brave. That was leadership. He placed a hand on Vash's shoulder. But here's your first real lesson. A true leader doesn't sacrifice himself unnecessarily. A true leader finds another way. Understands. Vash nodded, his throat too tight for words. Kalen stood and addressed all the cubs. 7 seconds. You failed by 7 seconds. Tomorrow, we train together. We'll find those 7 seconds. Not through fear, through trust, through working together. That's how humans learn to survive our world. He glanced back at the retreating instructors. That's how humans learn to survive everything. As Drawl and Morvax disappeared through the doors, Kalen felt a small hand grip his fingers. Little Tila had crept forward, her enormous eyes shimmering with tears. Are you going to stay? She whispered. Kalen knelt again and gently squeezed her hand. Yeah, little one. I'm staying. Vash watched the human comfort the smallest cub, and something shifted in his chest, something that felt like hope. Years later, when Commander Vash led the Allied fleet against the Void Swarm and saved 3 billion lives, interviewers would ask him where he learned to lead. He would always give the same answer. A human taught me that strength isn't about breaking others. It's about refusing to let others be broken. And somewhere, in a quiet retirement home on Earth, an old man with gray eyes would smile at the broadcast, remembering a trembling silver-furred cub who had stepped forward when it mattered most.